Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I think they probably opted to utilize the young Link, and then just were like, okay, let's just start the game with him, because that seems more like a logical transformation to me, and it kind of goes along with the theme that they ultimately came up with, which is kind of like loss of childhood, like suddenly like all these things happen and all your friends don't recognize you anymore, you don't recognize yourself, whatever. Which is kind of why Ocarina of Time struck such a chord with people. But yeah, I don't know, like, I mean, I think with this update they're talking about reverting to being a boy. I think it's just Nintendo of Japan told them an older story, they ran with it, they gave them a vague update, and someone wrote up a thing and used specific wording that makes us think that he starts off as an adult and goes back, right? But it could have just entirely been he starts off as a boy and becomes a man. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's more just a
miscommunication.
Miscommunication, or just not telling them everything, because Japanese companies are just, especially, Nintendo or like Sega, just notorious for that kind of stuff. It's kind of like we keep it unto ourselves until we're ready
to
tell you. You know what I mean? Like, that's the feeling that I kind of get.
Yeah, if we didn't see that with Breath of the Wild, then I don't know what to say, right?
Yeah. So
like, they were very secretive about that, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, they were a lot less secretive with Ocarina of Time than Breath of the Wild. I mean, you have all of these screenshots. And Breath of the Wild, they're like, let's just not talk about it for like 2 years.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which was incredibly frustrating. Or like Skyward Sword, if you remember, they debuted it at E3 one year, and it was just a poster.
Yeah.
And like that was it. And then
it
like
looked like Twilight Princess. It didn't look like Skyward Sword.
And like a year went by, nothing. Like, no updates. And then the next E3 or whatever it was, they had a trailer.
And CG it's like trailer.
Yeah, it was like, wow, like you went an entire year with like nothing, But at least from what I remember, it's been a long time. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like I know that it's a very, and I'm totally guilty of this, so I totally understand that it's very easy to romanticize what could have been, but I do think it's important to take a step back and say, like, okay, like, how did these companies operate? Like, did they just not have all the information? Did they mistake some of the information? Was it mistranslated? Like, it's entirely possible that it's less convoluted than we think, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's one of the reasons that while Daniel and I were talking about this, we were originally going to do the video to ourselves for the people watching this video. Tony wasn't originally going to be on this discussion. It was just going to be Daniel and I, but because I actually spoke to Tony earlier today about a different project video, but so that reminded me, is like, oh, I know someone who's essentially an expert on 64 disk drive stuff, much more, like, as big of a Zelda fan as I am. Tony is much more knowledgeable with a lot of the beta elements and what was supposed to be or what could have been, as opposed to me, where I just know really what takes place in the game, not necessarily a lot of the cut content and stuff like that. Especially a lot of the URA stuff you get from secondhand sources, so it's hard to tell who's right, who's wrong, what's being changed or exaggerated. So that's why I wanted to bring you on, Tony. So thank you for coming on. We've run a little bit longer than I was hoping. It's been about 30-40 minutes as opposed to the 20. So I just wanted to really quick say thank you for coming on. Hopefully we didn't take up too much of your time, but with these, because we didn't even get to all of the screenshots, Daniel and I, we may do a follow-up video on that, but what are there any of the screenshots or videos from this that really stand out from you? Because you did say that you've seen a lot of these before, but this website has it a lot more organized than other websites. So is there anything that particularly stands out for you, like the graveyard stuff, Adult Link fighting the child boss, or anything in particular?
And you're specifically referencing the jtheham.com, not the...
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the thing that stands out to me is the fact that it's well organized, that it seems to be none of this content is high res because they're like scans from magazines from like 90.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But when you're searching for content like this, a lot of the times that it's been reposted and reposted and reposted, the more that it's re-uploaded, it's compressed and compressed. This seems to be a reasonable resolution, reasonable clarity. It's nice to see that this was organized and really taken care of. So I do definitely appreciate that. And there's a lot of good stuff on like the beta quest here as well, which is always fun. Yeah, actually it's really just nice and well organized. And kind of reverting back to Nintendo's site, there was definitely some content there that may be on the Jay the Ham site. I haven't fully explored it yet, but just screenshots that are almost like in between screenshots. Like I've seen him on the horse in the sort of early build, but I didn't necessarily see every frame of animation that they put up there. You know what I mean? Which is kind of nice to be like, oh, that's something I haven't seen before.
So
holy crap!
are these images or these sites something that could help you with videos on your channel in the future?
Possibly. I have to fully explore them. A lot of this type of content we've covered, but I think that there could be some good nuggets of information here that I can definitely use.
So specifically, how I came across this, I mentioned earlier, it was a rabbit hole. This might help you out as well. I literally I was trying to find images to use for the thumbnail, specifically the one where it's Link standing in front of the Triforce and the... Like I'm sure a lot of people have seen that.
That one's pretty infamous. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was specifically looking for that image, and I was having trouble finding it. So I just typed in Zelda Ura, however it's pronounced, in Google Images, and then I was like, well, there's going to be a lot of reposts if I look at just whatever the images are that first pop up, because there's thousands of YouTube videos from people talking about it. So I went to thinking, okay, the game came out 1998, so maybe if I put the time on Google Docs saying look for any websites posting articles from 1997 to the year 2000, that way if there's anything that pops up online, it would be original. And I just kept on doing that, adding in another year until I was able to come across this stuff. And I think the earliest I was able to find stuff about Ura Zelda with Google Images was around 2004 or 2005. So that's how I was able to come across it. And where it was news that was much older, it might be more accurate, as opposed to something that's been retold and retold and retold through articles and secondhand sources. Yeah,
I think that's a very smart way to do it. Honestly, I hadn't even really thought about that. I'm looking through this as you're talking here. Don't worry, I was paying attention. But I'm seeing some content that even more content I have not seen before. There's one with Link in the sort of the market sort of castle town with like a Mario hat in the corner. Like,
which section that is?
Actually, that Mario hat, it's in a few different screenshots. It's actually from, like, I guess whatever magazine they were scanning it from. It's just like a bit of
just Mario
different image that
overlaid on
snuck
it. Okay.
in.
Because
so
it looks of different quality.
It's not, Mario's hat wasn't like an Easter egg in the game. I noticed that too, and I was like, what? But it's in a couple other images.
That blew me away for a second. Yeah, thank you for explaining that.
No worries.
The one that, I think it was whatever website. Wasn't there a magazine called 64 Dream or something like that? Nintendo Dream? Or Dream 64?
Right. Sure.
And I think that might be what this is from. Like that Mario on top of the 64 could have been their logo. Or
probably.
That way,
like that.
IGN kind of puts their... watermark on stuff. This could have been whatever magazine it was watermark.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's what my thoughts are. And the one that stands out to me is where it says Ocarina of Time beta content A and C, because for the people that go to this website, they have everything organized in such a way that they group everything together that has the same screen layout or HUD layout. So there's pictures where there's no C buttons, just A and B. There's some where there's A buttons and the C buttons. and different variations of that. But on the Ocarina of Time beta content A and C, there's an image where it's Link standing on a red carpet in front of a small pedestal that says Link in either a dungeon or an extremely early version of the Temple of Time. It seems more likely to be the Temple of Time, as the pillars, carpet, and podium seem undungeon-like, unless you compare them to the final dungeon rooms in Link's Awakening, which they bear resemblance to.
It looks like this has those, like, there's a few rooms in Ocarina of Time that have, like, those pre-rendered, with a fixed camera and the pre-rendered backgrounds.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this looks like as well in this room, as opposed to, like, those pillars. I don't think they're fully 3D models of that pillar. It's probably just there's some basic collision and that pre-rendered texture on it.
Yeah.
Which they look good, but yeah.
If on A mixed C, really quickly at the very bottom, there's an image of a close-up of the shield you were talking about in one of the videos with Holly Wolf about there being the Triforce with the down-facing Triforce symbol.
Yes.
So that's very clear.
Some of these old shield designs look like the artwork for again, A Link to the Past shields as well. If you in the game, his shield is like 8 sprites, or 8 pixels rather. Sorry, but so it's hard to see. But then in the artwork, it has sort of a different design, and some of these kind of remind me of that, where the Triforce is much larger than in the final game.
Yeah, and the one that stands out the most to me that kind of looks like it could have been potentially another, like this is so early it probably wasn't even related to Ura Zelda, but it would have been nice if they cut it out of the final game to include it into the Ura expansion. But it's on Ocarina of Content A and B, about halfway through to the bottom. It shows what looks like Turtle Rock, like it's a dungeon entrance that's the mouth of a turtle that clearly is nowhere to be seen in the original Ocarina of Time. But it says...
at first I thought that was the big head in Dodongo's Cavern, but yeah, it could totally be Turtle Rock.
Yeah, I've actually heard that that's a Dodongo's Cavern thing.
Oh, is it?
That Turtle Rock was a rumor.
Okay, because it looks like it could be a Dodongo, but in this it looks more like a turtle.
Yeah, I've heard both over the years. The more common, or not the more common, but the more recent theory was that, again, people were suspecting Turtle Rock because it just seems so much like that, but it's
and at that point
Dodongo.
It was a staple in the Zelda series at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's only been
rain on your
2
parade.
games, but the 2 out of 4, so I guess staple enough. But yeah, I just saw that in my first thought. I didn't read the caption, I guess, but I was like, that must be an early design of the giant Dodongo head in Dodongo's Cavern. But because there's so many, it's like
they do show
it's with the other Dodongo's Cavern
above that.
Yeah, there's like a bunch of screenshots in Dodongo's Cavern. He's fighting a Keese, and then he's just in the main room where there's no lava at this point, I guess. And there's the bridges. I think the area he's fighting the Dodongo is actually in the lava pit in the final game, but I guess they hadn't put that in yet. But, this is all conjecture from...
Oh, that would be a giant
Dodongo, what I have.
That wouldn't be a normal-sized Dodongo, so that's interesting, because it is a lot bigger than Link, just not as big as the final boss ended up being. But the description for the Dodongo mouth, or the turtle mouth, however you want to say it, IGN, I imagine this is a quote from IGN, not Nintendo, so... but the website says the wall textures would have you believe that this is still in DC, Dodongo's Cavern.
Dodongo's Cavern, yeah.
Though if it is, it's certainly not in the main room. One clue as to what this might be is in this report from IGN 64. I guess that was Nintendo or IGN's original name when they only covered Nintendo stuff. But the quote from IGN says, all of the landmarks of Hyrule seem to have made the jump from 16 to 64-bit, including Turtle Rock, Hyrule Castle, and even Death Mountain. Could this be the entrance to Turtle Rock? Possibly. So, IGN's quote could have been what was misinterpreted as Nintendo's quote for a long time, leading people to think this could have been Turtle Rock, maybe.
Yeah,
I think so.
But yeah, is there anything else that stands out for you?
I would just say that, not specifically with these images, but just in general with Ura Zelda, there's kind of, just for your audience to give a little background that maybe I should have given at the beginning, but there's kind of two competing camps, basically. There were so many interviews with like Miyamoto and different people working on the project that gave so many different ideas as to what the expansion could be. Different characters, different weapons, side stories, all sorts of stuff, which is where sort of the conventional theorizing with Ura Zelda comes from.
Yeah.
And then there's people that just say that it was like Master Quest. So it's, and for example, I do a lot of work with Luigi Blood, who does a lot of N64 disk drive like hacking and such, and he's told me that either most of or the majority, or he's kind of more so hinted at it than directly said it, but he's like, I think it was just Master Quest from what I've seen in the files. Like what's supposed to hook in and change is dungeon stuff, so there's kind of also that camp too, but then maybe it wasn't originally supposed to be that, right? So there's definitely a lot of you can kind of go crazy circling around trying to wonder what could have been based on these interviews.
Yeah, I would,
you know what I mean?
Say, just as we read the original story of Ocarina of Time changing from what we read there to what we have now, I would say it's possible that the story for the expansion could have went through multiple changes as well, which is why you have, in some interviews, like Miyamoto is famous for saying Ura Zelda was Master Quest, but then there's other interviews where he talks about having, like cutting down a sign and having the sign stay cut down. You could walk across the sand and your footprints would stay there, and new quests and stuff like that. So they could have been a bit more ambitious at first, and then decided to dial it back.
Those interviews they were referencing regarding the signs and the sand, that was just for when it was on the disk drive, specifically. So like the original idea was like a world that you could perpetually change, which is kind of what you got in Doshin the Giant, right? Where I don't know if you guys played Doshin the Giant, but it's basically like a god simulator, and you can manipulate the textures and create mountains and
I've never
whatever.
played it. I've seen a few of your videos on it. Actually, on one of the newest videos, in the GameCube, you were showing the different versions of the GameCube output, and you went on to talk a little bit about that game in there, but I've seen other videos where you talk about it before.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, originally that was the intention. I think that it also makes a lot of sense that if you were having these amazing, let's say, Fable-like promises, with original Fable, was it Peter Molyneux was like, you're going to be able to do this and do that and all this stuff, but it didn't really pan out. So it makes a lot of sense for him to say that, and then when Master Quest rolled around, being like, oh no, that's all it ever was supposed to be. And maybe that's all that was ever supposed to be over the last year of production, but that wasn't originally the intention. Or maybe he had these grandiose ideas for Ura Zelda, and he gave these interviews, but it wasn't actually what the developers were doing. You know what I mean? So it's and the reason why I bring that up, just as a kind of you're asking for my final point. When you read the quote from IGN, you could basically just take it with a grain of salt, because it's could be Turtle Rock, or it couldn't be, or maybe some intern speculated that, or maybe they were told that it was Turtle Rock by Nintendo, and maybe that was true, or maybe that you know what I mean? Like there's so many different possibilities that it's really hard to determine.
Yeah, you don't know
what's real.
The actual source was. You just have the second hand.
So you can kind of, and of course it's really fun, don't get me wrong, and I'm not trying to cut down any ideas, but I'm just saying that, like,
dream.
Yeah, well, no, don't get me wrong, like, I built a large portion of my channel on Ura Zelda, right? So I love it, don't get me wrong, but I do think that it's very easy to go off and just go wild about things that people have said and this and that, but it's just very can be very challenging, I guess. Is my point.
All right.
So
I think that is a perfect way to wrap this up, actually. So, Tony, for people, again, that may not know who you are, explain again what you do on your channel, where they can find any news about your channel, upcoming videos, stuff like that, whether it's Twitter, YouTube, Discord, whatever it may be. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. I'll handle Hard4Games, but primarily on YouTube. That's our bread and butter. And Hard4Games is a channel where we do video game reviews, but we also dive very much into Zelda beta content, development, N64 DD stuff, kind of the weird, obscure gems of gaming, especially in the 16 to 64-bit era, kind of in that realm. So just search Hard4Games on YouTube and you will find us.
All right. And is there any older videos that you would recommend to someone who might be interested?
Yeah, we actually have a couple of playlists that would make a lot of sense for 64 disk drive and Zelda edition, let's say. We have a playlist for the N64 disk drive, which probably has like 15 videos everywhere from talking about the hardware to talking about reviewing the games that were released. And then we also have Zelda and Zelda beta playlists that you can check out. And we do this thing called beta questing, where basically we take the cartridge, we put in some codes, and bing, bang, boom, suddenly this unused beta element is in Link's hand, or he's interacting with it. So because there's a lot of stuff that was left over.
Yeah.
So
actually, those videos are very funny. I've seen those ones, and they're very, very funny. Especially you guys getting frustrated and packing beers back while you're playing.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
One of the most interesting videos that I've seen on your channel, one of my favorites, was you went very in depth on the 7-day cycle of Majora's Mask.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I actually really loved that video because you do a lot of stuff because there's a glitch to get to like the 4th day, but then sometimes the 4th day is actually day 0, but then sometimes it's like day -3 or something like that, depending on how you access it.
And it also depends on your perspective, right? Because the original game was supposed to be 7 days, right? So
now,
if you're on,
was that something that was originally planned for Zelda or Zelda 64 when it was first being developed strictly for the disk drive, or was that something that was new for Majora's?
I would say that would be a big stretch. I think the 7-day cycle is specific to Majora's Mask because they were trying to quickly create a game they wanted to move away from Zelda, do a new game, but they had very little time to do it because they were basically doing it on a bet that they had to do it within a year. So they reused all of the assets. They wanted a cycle that would be small but rich, So basically they just kind of that's how it kind of spawned. That's how it came about. But you could definitely speculate that a lot of things from Ocarina of Time or Zelda, or maybe the disc version of the original game made it into Majora's Mask, just because it was the same team and they were moving directly from Zelda to Majora's Mask. And strangely, well, not even strangely, coincidentally, there's a lot of beta content that's beta content in Ocarina of Time that's beta content in Majora's Mask. Like they were literally like using the same files. It was like, it was just kind of interesting where it's like, oh, here's this thing that was used in Ocarina of Time. Okay, here it is again. Unused, So, long story short, yes and no.
All right, and the final question that I have for you is, because on your channel you've done a lot of, I guess, famous collaborations, at least to me, they're really good collaborations where you have someone else who I watched, like you have the Metal Jesus video, the collaboration with him, the American 64 disk drive, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, he found a prototype.
Yeah, and that was his YouTube channel as well, Metal Jesus Rocks, or Metal.
That's correct. Metal Jesus Rock. So yeah, he actually has 2 videos on the prototype N64 DD. Basically, it was just an American prototype, right? So
Which
it
was unheard of at the time.
Yeah, because well, it was, one could assume that they were making it for the American market initially, but it was never released in the US. So we've never seen an American NTSC version of one, and he just happens to have the only one that's known to still exist. Really, so it was just an incredible find. So
I would get that appraised and insured like ASAP.
Yeah,
you never know who's gonna.
How do you even appraise that? Because
I don't know.
I mean, I would guess he could probably turn that and. Yeah, I mean, he could probably turn it around and sell it for at least, I'd say, $5 to $10,000.
Yeah.
Minimum, you know, I mean, but it's like, how do you even choose how do you even figure that out? Like, so for example, there's just these items that are just totally priceless. Like this one guy, his name is Andrew, and I've mentioned him multiple times on my show. He's a prototype collector, and he sends them to me, and I take a look at them. Right now, in my place, I'm looking at a prototype N64 DD dev unit, and it's barely different. It's a little bit different, but it's like, how do you put a value on that? I mean, it's so freaking rare, you know. He could probably.
I wonder, like, how do people acquire these things too? Like, do they, like, is someone digging through Nintendo of America's dumpster and then they auction it off and it ends up in a yard sale and then someone else buys it and then sends it to Tony? Like,
I actually have something pertaining to this. So I apologize again, Tony, for keeping you any longer, but a lot of this stuff is really interesting to talk about. But what Daniel was saying, I had Mike Drucker, who used to work at Nintendo during the Skyward Sword, around the days that, like, before the Wii U came out, when the 3DS was first coming out and stuff. He worked there around that time, worked on Skyward Sword, Mario Party, Kid Icarus, some other games. He said, and then I also heard this from a few other people, that Nintendo once a year would have like a warehouse clear out where they would just have people come in, and they either got it for free or they could pay like insanely low prices to get like brand new NES consoles that are like still packaged, never been opened.
Holy cow.
And
yeah, I've heard that too.
I'm going on a road trip.
He said they would just have warehouses
just for
stuff.
Nintendo employees, though.
Yeah.
So you can still try your road trip. Try that. So I didn't know that it was a once a year thing, but I had heard, because years ago they had Switch locations in Seattle, and I don't know if Metal Jesus got
whenever
his
they
from
went to
someone
Washington, like, are you talking about before that?
They were in Seattle and they switched locations within Seattle.
Okay, because now they're in Redmond.
Okay, within Washington. My apologies. Yeah.
No, I think I'm the one that got confused. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Redmond's very close to Seattle or something like that. But basically, the Switch locations within Washington State. And when they did that, they did what was known as the Nintendo Garage Sale, and it's similar to what you guys were saying. But my understanding, and someone who we talked to while we were there, who gave us some blue discs to test, that's where he got them from. Basically, they just allowed Nintendo employees to scoop up a lot of this stuff, and a lot of them took it home. So that would be probably where a lot of it comes from.
Yeah.
Because if they don't want something to go out or be public, it very rarely gets out. So
yeah, and I would say like a lot of the beta stuff or development cartridges would be like still, instead of warehouses over here at Nintendo of America, it would be like locked up in Japan.
A lot of it, yeah. I mean, the early stuff, yeah, definitely. That said, there are definitely like kiosk discs and like demo discs that have additional files and file structures that retail versions do not have. So, for example, I'm working on a video regarding Star Fox Adventures, and this guy, Hugo Peters, I'm working with him. He searched the Star Fox Adventures demo disc, and there's all of these folders that don't exist on the retail version. There's tons of character models and environments that are like transitional or beta You know, so there's kind of examples like that it's not like a straight up beta of Star Fox Adventures, but you get kind of this little like keyhole peek.
Yeah, and that game started out as like Dinosaur Planet or something.
Correct.
Before it changed. So is
Yeah.
the stuff like left over from that game, or is it still Star Fox stuff that just didn't make it?
Both. You'll find out in 2 weeks when I release the video.
Alright,
But no. Actually, I think it might be this upcoming week. But anyways, yeah. So it's both. It's a lot of transitional stuff and beta stuff and stuff you'd find in the game, but it's just a little bit different.
Alright.
So.
All right. Well, once
it's neat,
again, Tony, thank you for coming on, giving us all of this information, discussing with us, and we would love to have you on in the future. Daniel was talking about before you came on, he was a fan of your channel, so
Thank you.
he's
Appreciate
never
that.
had he's never had the opportunity to talk with you. So this.
Well, now I feel bad because I just talked the whole damn time. I didn't let him speak.
No, man,
Please, we're gonna
It's
have
like
to
listening
do this
a
again.
TED talk. I love it.
Yeah, so
Well, you know, I'm not the expert on this. Like, I would say that I'm very knowledgeable about, you know, in-game lore and Zelda, like as it was released. But when it comes to beta stuff and its development and all this stuff, like it's not at all what I would say I'm not very knowledgeable about it. So this has been like just a really cool, thing to sometimes just I gotta kind of take it in a bit, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So
don't
we
feel
were
bad.
we were just looking at some of these images earlier, and we were just saying like this. Some of these are like the first time that we've seen them. We were like, this is just a lot to take in, because unlike the story, which was just all words, which could have been mistranslated. We know how infamously bad translations were in the early 90s for video games. So instead of like a quote being mistranslated or miscommunicated with these screenshots, you actually see kind of what's there. So like we were just like dumbfounded by what some of these were showing off, which is really interesting. And then having you come on and talk about it is really great as well, because that kind of clears up some of the stuff that we were talking about. Because as I was saying, you're one of the only people that I personally know that is knowledgeable about stuff like this. Like, anytime people assume because I'm a Zelda fan and have YouTube videos and stuff that I'll just know everything there is to about Zelda. So someone will come in and have a question about whether someone wants to know something about Ura Zelda or beta content from another Zelda game. They'll ask me, and sometimes I know, but a lot of the times I refer them to your channel or your Twitter. I'm like, hey, you should go ask these guys. That's what they specialize in. Like you have the weekend podcasts where you just talk about random discussion stuff, but then you also have the beta content videos. So I always push people towards your direction, because I don't really, other than like Beta 64, is that the website?
Yeah, Beta 64 does a lot of that.
Beta
that kind of
64,
stuff,
Did You Know Gaming? I don't personally know them, so I just push everyone towards you.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Thank you so much for the referrals and the recommend.
Yeah. All right. I guess that brings us to the very end. So thank you, Daniel, as always, for being a co-host, and thank you, Tony, for
Jesse.
joining on very, very last minute, letting us take up an hour of your time.
Sure. Oh, it was fun, guys. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
If possible, in the future, I messaged you earlier about doing sort of a what-if video. You said you've already done it on your channel. I need to check that out.
Yeah, it's... Honestly, I can't even remember what video we did it in. But we definitely covered that topic of sort of what could have happened if the N64 DD was successful. And, I'd love to cover that topic with you, at some point. Just whenever is good for you, just let me know. And I think that a lot of that alternate history stuff, it could be very interesting.
Yeah, because to keep it simple, like my take on it was, if the 64 disk drive was successful, then we would have gotten Zelda 64 as it was originally meant to be, or the Ura Zelda, which may have made Aonuma feel that he didn't need to work on another Zelda game, because all of the unused content would have likely been used. So then there wouldn't have been much left over to use for ideas and concepts in Majora's Mask. So we may have never even gotten Majora's Mask if the 64 disc drive was successful.
Yeah.
So
And strangely, Majora's Mask was originally developed for the 64 disc drive, which was weird because it was already kind of failing. So it was bizarre that they opted to cartridge for
that was
Ocarina, and then
it
they
had
were still
codename Zelda Gaiden or Zelda Gaiden.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
All right. Well, thank you again, Tony.
We keep talking.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. It's so fun.
We're gonna stop for good this time.
So
here,
fun
right?
talking about this stuff. So thank you once again, Tony. There'll be a link in the description for everyone to go check out Hard4Games on YouTube and Twitter. And thank you again. Thank you, Daniel. And we're out.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
The videos on this channel are funded by supporters on Patreon like you. If you're a fan of this channel and would like to join on videos, receive shoutouts, watch videos early, have your questions answered, or have your topic discussed on our podcast, please consider supporting on Patreon for these and many other rewards for just $1. Shoutouts for this video includes Link Use the Triforce, Rusty Caulfield, Lovable Christie, Give Time 15, Shadow to Us, Robbie Morgan, and Lunarium. I want to thank all of you for everything you have done to help support this channel.